Hey everyone, welcome to the Burnt Breast Homestead channel. Today, I show you how I canned ground beef. The first thing is cooking the ground beef. The very first thing was actually preparing 18 pint-sized mason jars, lids, and rings by washing them thoroughly with soap and water. Then inspecting each of the mason jars to ensure there were no cracks or chips. Now back to cooking the ground beef. You do not have to cook it all the way through, whereas every piece is done, but you do want to cook it enough to brown it and get those flavors going. The meat will be thoroughly cooked by the end of the canning process. This is about 12 pounds of ground beef purchased in bulk from a somewhat local farm, where their cattle is pasture raised. The meat is cooking in 2 cast iron frying pans to speed up the process. I am able to cook 2 pounds of meat per 10-inch frying pan. Why am I canning ground beef? Well, because not everyone has the room in their freezer to store a lot of food. It also allows you to take full advantage of sales to buy as much meat as possible for your family to store and eat. It is a good idea to preserve food in various ways, so all your food isn't in one place. It would suck to have $1,000 worth of ground beef or meat in the freezer during a prolonged power outage. It also allows you to make quick and easy meals out of canned meat. Canning your own meat allows you to know exactly what is in your canned food, meaning no fillers and good quality meat from local sources. It is much cheaper to can your own meat than to buy it by at least 40 to 60%. It allows you to increase your food pantry for uncertain times. There are many people being laid off of their jobs, and we are in a recession. By the way, check out my Cooking with My Mr. Buddy heater and cooking on a wood-burning stove for alternative solutions to cooking during a power outage. This is what 12 pounds of cooked ground beef looks like. The next step is to fill the mason jars with the ground beef, then top it off with hot water. So the jars will be filled to the 1-inch line, which is the bottom ring where my thumb is. The canner is ready. It has water added, 2 to 3 inches. This is the All-American canner, and it calls for 2 to 3 inches of water. And I have the bottom rack in there, which I will sit the jars on top of. Fill this pot with the jars, and then add the second rack, and then fill it some more. Here I'm using a slotted spoon because I don't want any of the grease from the meat, or I want as little as possible of the grease from the meat in the jars, because it's the fat that will cause it, one, to not seal if it gets on the rim, as well as for it to go rancid quicker. So I'm just filling the jars all the way up to the 1-inch mark. Again, that's that bottom ring right here. And I'm just going to process each one of these jars before adding the, before going to the next stage, which is adding the water and debubbling. Now that all the jars are filled with the cooked ground beef, I add about a half teaspoon of salt to each pint-sized jar. Adding salt does not assist in preserving the meat in any way, shape, or form. It simply adds to flavor. You do not need to add any salt if you don't want. Now fill the jars with the boiling water to within 1 inch of the rim of the jar. Now I'm just going to go through and debubble. And at this point, if I need to add more water to the jars to get it back to the first ring, I'll do so. Next, the rim of each jar is wiped with a 50-50 water vinegar solution to remove any food particles and or grease. Food particles or grease on the rims can prevent the jars from properly sealing. Finally, we add the lid and the rings on the jars, twisting the rings to be finger tight. Try not to over tighten the rings. These pint-sized jars were processed for 75 minutes at 10 psi. If I were canning quart-sized jars, they would have processed for 90 minutes. This is the All-American 930 canner. The instructions I follow to operate this canner may be different than your canner, so please follow the instructions for your canner for this part of the video. I placed the lid of this canner by twisting it to align the arrow on the lid with the indentation on the pot. Then I tighten the caps opposite one another to get a more leveled seal. Then I allow the canner to vent steam for 10 minutes before placing the weight on the 10-pound side, which is proper for my elevation. After 75 minutes, I turn off the heat and allow the pressure gauge to reach 0. Then I wait another 10 or so minutes before removing the weighted gauge from the canner. Then I remove the lid away from my face to protect it from the hot steam escaping the pot. This is the day after the jars were removed from the canner. This whole process took about 3.5 hours to complete from start to finish. 1.5 hours of that was waiting. With this meat, I can quickly make spaghetti and meat sauce, tacos or breakfast burritos, chili, ground beef pizza topping. I can add it to a soup, make sloppy joe, and much more. The final step in this whole process is removing the rings from the jars after they set overnight, then wiping the jars down, labeling, and storing them. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe to help this small channel to grow.